What's going on, guys? Kivox here, and I just wanted to make a somewhat quick video just kind of going over my most used tools that I use for wand making. Hopefully it helps you guys kind of decide what you want to buy first if you guys are going to get into wand making. It can get really expensive. I've had just some old tools that I've slowly been, I'm like, hey, I think I have a tool that could help me with this. And I definitely recommend anybody that's going to get into making anything like that, just every tool that you buy, just think of it as somewhat of an investment into the future, because you're not going to only use it once. If you need a tool more than, let's say, like 3 times, that means you're probably going to need it in the future for more stuff. So think of it as, like I said, an investment. And some tools are more expensive than others. Some you use less, but they're really expensive. So you really have to pick and choose what is the most important to use right at the beginning. And that's what I'm going to be going over today. If you guys don't know, there are a bunch of changes coming to the wand shop very soon. As you can see, I'm working on a ton of stuff right now, and it's really overwhelming, and I'm trying to get everything done in a timely manner. And I'm hoping for some cool Christmas stuff coming out. Not really Christmas stuff, but for Christmas, coming out before Christmas type thing. And also, don't forget about the wand giveaway that I am doing for patrons. So if you are a patron, you get a chance to win one of my wands. I haven't decided yet. I thought it was going to be just one, but I may give you guys an option to choose between a couple of wands. So stay tuned for that, and check out the Patreon. It's up in the little eye up there if you want to go check it out. So, alright guys, so let's get started. First things first, I just want to make sure that if you are going to get into wand making, that you be careful, that you have parental supervision, or you are an adult that knows that you are working with dangerous materials and equipment and possible magic, so you got to be careful. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I've gotten hurt a lot just by trying to make stuff, so I just warn you, you probably will cut yourself or something. So be careful if you're really gonna get into this, because some of the stuff that I'm gonna go over is dangerous and needs supervision. You've been warned. The very first thing that anybody thinks about when it comes to carving is carving knives, right? So what I ended up getting was a 3 set, which I mentioned before, and now I can't find them. These are the ones that I got. These are a flex cut set. They're different lengths, different thicknesses for the blades. They hold up their sharpness pretty well. Depending on what type of material you're cutting, these are gonna work. I also recommend, if you are getting this set or even one of these, if you get one, you're gonna have to sharpen it, every, let's say, 20 minutes. That's kind of like my rule is, if I'm carving something by hand, about every 20 minutes, I sharpen it for a good few minutes, and then I go back to work. I also recommend, if you are going to be carving by hand with knives, get a pair of cut-resistant gloves. These are not cut-proof, but they are resistant. Normally this would, you can see I'm hitting it pretty hard, so normally that would cut right through. I'm just kidding. That would cut right through my hand. It would slice it up really good. These are pretty good. They're not stab proof, so it will still stab you. So be careful with that. But if you get a nice little graze, it's not going to instantly slice your finger open like I have done. It took me a couple times to realize, like, hey, maybe I need some hand protection, and I was just like, let's buy these. I'll put links down below to everything that I have. The one downfall of these gloves is it makes everything really slippery. Like these, this feels like a, I don't know, like a banana squishing out of my hand. It just, everything is slick and slippery with these gloves on. So maybe use one glove just to hold the wand and carve that way. Another set of hand tools that I do recommend that are fairly cheap. You can go super expensive if you want the super high-end, crazy quality. But for little things that we're going to be doing, it's not as important. So I picked up a decently cheap, and I honestly think that the quality of these are really nice. They're made in Japan, so you know they're good, right? That's how that works. These are basically small chisels and U-shaped tools. So therefore, the blade is shaped like this, so you can get some nice little grooves cut out of things. There's a V-tool, and then there's an angled one and a straight one. Again, I'll put a link down below to these. They're fairly cheap, and They're very useful when it comes to tiny little detail that you want to do. I've only used these very little. I haven't really made like a whole wand where I use these a bunch. But as far the little bit that I have used them, they've done very well, and they keep their sharp edge well enough. It all depends. Like I always say, it depends on what kind of wood you're carving, and that's definitely going to have a effect on your tools, and it's going to make it a little bit harder. So now that we have the knives and the chisels that we went over, we're going to need a way to sharpen them. This is made by FlexCut, which is the same people that make the knives. And what it is a sharpening tool, basically. And there's all of the chisels and the V's and the U's on this side, and on the opposite side you would use to sharpen the knives. So you would just put their stuff on here. You know, it's like abrasive material that helps sharpen the edge. And I haven't used this one yet. This one's brand new. I have my old one that I made, but this one's nice because it has the V's and the U's for the other tools. And I'm super excited about this. Again, fairly cheap. Buy all your stuff on Amazon, because if you go to like a wood shop, they're really expensive. They're like double the price at a wood shop. Like this is like $40 or something like that, or 30 something dollars for something like this. And I think on Amazon it was like $18 or something. So, you know, this is definitely a necessity. If you're gonna go hand tools, you need a way to sharpen them. This just makes it easier. You don't need to use this. You can make one like my old one, where it was just a flat piece of wood with some leather on it. That worked fine too. One of the final things, the hand tools that I use is just regular sandpaper. This is 500 grit, but I have like 180, 80, and I think like 300 or 320 or something like that, and 500. I also have really, really high ones, but those are more for painted things that you want a nice gloss shine on. And some hand files. You can get a bunch of hand files. You can get a whole set of like 10 or something like that, different shapes. But hand files are really useful for little corners or little edges that you can't get into with other things. There's rounded ones, there's flat ones. This is a square one. This is a wider flat one. They're really useful, but definitely this is a must. This is kind of just a finishing touch. You wouldn't really be using this to sand the wand down to its shape. But one of the tools that I like to use the most, which is a couple of sanders that I use. They're not super expensive. I think I bought them one of them at Walmart, and the other one was at Harbor Freight. So they're fairly cheap. I don't have a lot of room in where I work and make my wands, so I really can't have a bunch of big sanders over there. So I figured I'd share this with you guys so you guys know what kind that I use. It's not really important what type you use, or at least what brand you use. I just have two different ones that I use for different components of the wand and different parts that I want to do certain things. If that makes sense, I hope you'll understand soon. So don't mind how dirty these are, because as you can see, I do use them a lot. So this is just a, I think it's a 5-inch orbital sander. It's a Skill brand one. It's not super fancy. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. I just attach a vacuum to it and then use it. It gets dust everywhere anyway. So it doesn't really work that well, but it does the job, right? We could change the sandpaper grit to get different amounts of grittiness on it. And we got this cheapo belt sander that I actually have the trigger taped up. And I'll show you guys why I have that trigger taped up, and it just makes your job a little bit easier depending on how you're going to use this. I basically use this as a almost like a tabletop sander because I don't have one. I do plan on getting one at some point, but again, I don't have a lot of space, so I got to pick and choose what I'm going to do. And this guy works. This guy does its job. It does enough for me where I'm just trying to cut off material, get as much material off as I can to be able to get the shape that I want, and then go in with the fine details and some other tools and get it to the point where I'm happy. So this is kind of like the roughing out, and this guy does the job well enough. It does the job well enough. It's not perfect. Makes a lot of mess, as you can see. I already got a bunch of mess right here. But yeah, so that's my sanders, my crappy sanders that I use. I actually almost forgot to talk about this. You can see it's a pedal, right? So what you do is you plug in your tool into this. That's why I have the tape on here. Remember I mentioned that before? That's why I have the tape on here, so that I could plug this tool in. It's always on, and I plug it into here, and then when I do this, it actually kicks on, it gets power. This is just a temporary switch. As soon as you hit this, it gets power. You let go of it, it cuts the power. It's not like a potentiometer, so it doesn't give you like half power. If you're halfway down, you don't get any speed control. It's just an on-off switch. But you can put it on your foot, and you can continue to use your hands and not worry about having to turn on the button or switch the switch on. I don't recommend anybody doing what I did. I'm just letting you guys know what I do. It is not 100% safe depending on what type of tool you're using. These are made more for like benchtop tools, like a bandsaw or something like that. I love this thing, and I basically have a couple of these, and I hook up all my tools to these whenever I use them, so that I don't have to keep kicking them on and off, on and off. I just step on the switch. Gets the job done a little bit faster, helps out a little bit. Not perfect, but cheap. I think these are like $10 or something like that, so highly recommended. This is actually a recent addition to the family. If you guys don't know, this is a vise that it's actually useful in a couple of different ways. One, you can use a vise like this to hold the wand while you work on it, while you try to carve it out or use other things on it or sand it a little bit, so that you don't have to also hold the wand and hold the tool and hold whatever at the same time. So this frees up your hands a bit. You could put the wand right in here. Let's pretend this is a wand. You could just, this is attached to the table. You put the wand in there, and then boom, you got the wand right there. You can go and get your job done a little bit easier. That's what I do. Not for everything, but for some things it helps. For certain things, you need your hand there. You need to support it. You need to use certain things. I'm going over my primary tools that I use. Probably the first tool that I ever take the wood to before I even start doing anything. Like as soon as I have my pattern and I know what I want to do, I take it to the bandsaw. So this is the bandsaw. It's pretty heavy. It's not as big. It looks kind of big in the camera, but it's not actually that big. It turns, it cuts stuff. You put your material in here, it cuts. It's dangerous. Be careful. This is a super cheapo Harbor Freight one. I think I bought this at Harbor Freight. It was about probably a little bit over $100 or something like that. And I just use it for rough cuts. It's nothing special. It's not something super accurate. There's thousands of better bandsaws out there, so you don't really need a lot for making something like a wand, because you're not being super accurate. You're not being like 100%. It doesn't have to fit into a notch perfectly. I mean, some you would want it to be extremely accurate, but I always feel like that's kind of like the final touch. You do that by hand. That adds some personality to the wand. It adds some customization in some way. I probably think personality was the best way to describe that. I think that's the best way to put making a wand. You're not machining the same thing over and over and over. At least not at my shop. That's not what I do. Every wand is unique, and every wand has to have its own personality. Bandsaw, super useful. Not extremely important though. You can do pretty much everything without this. You can use a handsaw. This just speeds up the roughing out of the shape of the wand. So now that we've made a big mess and I'm all dusty and gross now, let's go over possibly my favorite tool that I use. Probably if I had to choose out of everything that I have, this would probably be the most useful. This is the thing that I recommend for any maker, any crafter, anything like that. Anybody that's gonna want to make things with wood or even plastic or anything like that, I highly recommend getting a decent quality rotary tool of some kind. Personally, I have stuck with Dremel for most of the stuff that I do. So this is my little Dremel station thing I got, and I'll put a link to this little guy in the description as well. This is actually not the whole Dremel. The Dremel is just this guy right here. It's just attached to this piece. What's nice about this is that it kind of creates a almost like a drill press for the Dremel. But what's nice about the Dremel is that it spins really, really fast, so you can cut pretty clean cuts with it, depending on the type of blade that you're using and depending on the type of material that you're trying to cut. With this guy, you can actually cut glass okay. You can drill holes in glass. You got to be careful. You got to use some water. It's a big mess. I haven't messed with that yet, but it does allow you to do certain things. Obviously, this can come off. So again, this is just the stand. It helps hold. You can hang the Dremel up here while you use the extension for it. This is the actual Dremel itself right here. So this is probably the most useful thing I have. You can actually attach this to the front of this, and it allows you to have a smaller, wieldlier, more wieldly, more easier to wield thing in your hand, as opposed to this ginormous thing right here. So this actually, it's really nice. It goes from, it looks like 5,000 RPM to 35,000 RPM, I think. And I usually use it at the lower speed. If you use it too high, it can burn the wood and stuff like that. So definitely keep it at a lower speed. Another thing that I recently got was this bit kit right here, which is extremely useful. There's a lot of different bits in here that I use a lot. I would say there's probably like 4 that I use out of all of these. But the other ones are nice to have in case I want a certain shape. But if I had to choose one thing out of all the tools that I use, I would say I would use the Dremel the most, because I would say it's the most versatile. Obviously not including like sandpaper. You'd still want to use sandpaper and stuff like that. But I think that the Dremel is the most versatile tool that you can get, especially to start off. In some ways, I would say it's safer than a carving knife, because I feel like you have more control over it when you're cutting with it. If you know how to use the carving bits, you can actually get a very similar effect to actual carving, and get those kind of like those flat spots before you smoothen everything out. And if that's what you want, I know that some of the wands that I make, I like to have a somewhat more carved look, as opposed to nice and smooth and perfectly, symmetrical or whatever. To be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of symmetrical wands. I do have a lathe, but I do not like to use it. I feel like too many people lean on the lathe as a wand making tool. To be honest with you, I think it's kind of it's too easy. It's cheesy. All the wands look very, very similar. So I'm not a big fan of the lathe. I've used it for certain parts if I want one part of the wand to be straight. But if you look back at all my wands, there's no wand that I only use the lathe. That's the only thing I did. I always add in some sort of hand part of it, where I did have to go in and control everything by hand. Don't get me wrong, people make beautiful things on lathes, but for wand making, I think it's too simple. It's almost like cheating. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? I feel like some of these tools are like cheating as well, but you cannot get certain effects with just by hand carving. You can't make every single wand by hand carving it, unless you are a million-hour professional wood engraver, carver, person. That being said, again, I will put links to all of this stuff down below so you guys could pick up your own things. I have to look up a couple of things. I'll also put a link to this too. This is a like a leather string kit that I recently got that I actually like a lot. There's some cool tools in there. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out the Patreon if you guys want to be entered to win one of the wands. Any sort of contribution there will enter you to win next month. Again, we're doing the giveaway. It's going to be done. The winner is going to be chosen next month, the beginning of December. So make sure to go check that out if you guys want to be entered to win. And if you guys have any ideas for future videos, if you guys have any questions, make sure to leave them down below. I read all the questions. So yeah, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that little bell button if you want to be notified. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, bye, bye.